So thank you everybody for joining to our another month's Lunch and Learn webinar. It's been a really fun series and we've had some amazing speakers. Today we have Susan Geist and Caitlin Mildon. They both have been retired from their jobs, but now they're, of course, deciding to do other things with their life. So one of the things that I just am super passionate about and would love to kind of learn from them is the ability and how did they plan from an investing standpoint, from their life goal standpoint, and then we'll continue to kind of think through how they kind of made that journey in their life to be able to retire prior to 40 for one of them, I think, and right about at 40 for the other. So excited to talk about that. I also want to just take a minute to kind of talk about my personal passion, which is, when you give people a little bit of financial freedom, the person who emerges is that person who really lives a purposeful life. They are excited about what they're doing. So no matter what you choose to do, it's a choice at that point. And I think that just brings, better humans, better people. And that's really the exciting part. They're not sitting free, they're not idle, they're still doing, some amazing things with their time. But with that, I would love, Caitlin, for you to introduce yourself and, share a little bit about kind of where you are in your journey of being financially free.
Thanks, Divya. It's awesome to be here, and I'm excited to get to know your audience a little better also. And as Divya said, my name is Caitlin Muldoon. Susan and I co-founded Rising Femme Wealth, which is a really, it was our mission that kind of formed after we both had achieved financial freedom and tried to figure out for a little while what our lives look like in financial freedom. And for me personally, I had been building a real estate investment portfolio in parallel to working a W-2 job, and I was doing that for several years. So I was kind of starting on this path of let's just create a little bit of financial stability, and that morphed into realizing, wow, this really can create a large pool of passive income for me. And then I started to realize I can create some goals around this passive income and really start to target milestones where that passive income would replace my W-2 income. And eventually, I really would be able to leave my W-2 job if I wanted to. And so much changed in that journey. When I talk a lot about how I had this vision of what my life and financial freedom would look like when my husband and I first really started getting excited about what we thought our real estate portfolio could do. And I never really went back and revisited what that new life would look like, even though we revisited our goals so many times. So fast forward to 15 years later, once we hit financial freedom and we had 2 kids and we had updated our expense numbers so many times and our cash flow targets from our real estate portfolio. And we got to a point where we hit our goal, but the life that we had dreamed about when we first started setting those goals really wasn't as relevant anymore. So for me, there was a big adjustment. I wound up leaving my W-2 job, which looking back, I probably could have made some other changes to remain in my career and still being, feeling really sustained and satisfied by my career, even in financial freedom. But I wound up leaving, and then I went through kind of a discovery period of realizing my life is so different now. I've always kind of defined my life by my career. And so I went through a lot of discovery and realized that my financial freedom gave me so much in the way of confidence and knowledge, this ability to really feel like I could control my finances. And I wanted to share that. So I sat and tried to think about ways to be able to kind of share that with the world. And I experimented with all different ways. And eventually Susan and I joined forces and we created Rising Femme Wealth. So our mission right now is to really help empower women on their financial freedom journey and help them find that confidence to really control their financial future.
Thank you, Caitlin. That was amazing. Thank you. Susan, would love for you to kind of also walk us through your journey, where you are, and also would love for you to talk about So you and I have both similar age kids, plus the fact your husband was also able to recently quit his W-2 job. So kind of like walking us through that journey would be fantastic.
Yeah. So I kind of just bumbled along my way to financial freedom. I would say the real impetus for me for investing in real estate. So I was working in the public sector as a project manager, and after I had my first child, I asked if I could go part-time, and they said absolutely not. And that's when I realized, well, I need some other sources of income coming in because I cannot rely solely on my job, right? I have other things that I would like to give my attention to. I could always get laid off. Like, this is really risky for me to be just solely relying on my income coming in. So that was almost 15 years ago. I bought my first rental duplex. And the way that we kept just growing our nest egg was by essentially hiding the money, right? Sheltering the money. So we would have money go directly to the 401k, go directly to an HSA, go into the ESPP. The bonuses would just go into savings. Like, I wouldn't depend on that money. And that allowed us to grow our nest egg and keep buying more real estate. We also lucked out that we are based in Austin, Texas, which has had just a skyrocketing real estate market. And I mean, I will say a lot of that is luck. We happen to be in a growing area. And so we were able to get a lot of quick appreciation on our properties. And we eventually, everything just kept growing. We were maxing out the 401ks, and we got to the point, my husband was in tech, and he was just constantly stressed, having headaches all the time. It just wasn't working for him physically anymore. He had been doing it for over 20 years. And so he just said, look, I think I don't want to work anymore. We're good. And I also was running into some challenges at work where my work wasn't being valued and I was being made to feel small. And it was like, what we've created for ourselves is this opportunity to not have to put up with things that aren't working for us anymore. And so that's what happened, right? So my husband could say, hey, this isn't good for my health. I can leave my job. And I could say, these people aren't valuing me. I can leave my job. And that's what financial freedom is. It's money is just a tool to buy your freedom. And so, and we encourage women, it's not necessarily just, going into a hole and, being retired, laying on the beach. It's being able to do what you love, right? Not having a boss tell you can't spend time with your kids or go on vacation. No one's owning your time anymore. If you want to work, that's great. If you're providing value, you feel great about what you're doing, that's amazing. And we definitely encourage that. But it's so freeing to just know that you have that freedom to, maybe your company gets bought out, right? And your job could disappear, or you could get a bad boss, or, something might not work for you anymore. And so that's what I think Caitlin and I were both striving for in building our portfolio, just having a diverse set of income that we could rely on rather than just one particular job.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Susan, for that. And, I would love to just kind of chime in and share, like, couldn't agree more. I think that financial freedom to be able to do what you love to do, kind of with who you want to do, like time frame you want to do it. So for me personally, it was very similar as well. And kind of being able to now pick, I still love technology. I'm still involved here and there, but it's part-time. It's by choice. It's by the people I want to work with. So I still do some consulting here and there because it's just fun. It's passion. I'm a technology nerd. Like, I still say that very proudly. I mean, I do real estate full time, and now my side gigs are technology. So I still do that, but it also is a different attitude, a different mindset, because I don't need it, but I do it because I want to do it. And I think when you make that shift where your attitude changes from, hey, I don't have to go to a job that I hate. Now I am doing the work that I love. I think that is such a mental shift for so many people, and it just brings so much more joy, satisfaction, happiness to your life. I think that's really the goal. So thank you for sharing that. Let's get a little bit more tactical now to kind of think about if folks were to set up their wealth strategy, and I know you went about it both differently. So I would love to kind of hear specifics of, where did you start? How did you kind of start going into whether it be single family real estate, whether it be Airbnb, and I know there's also some syndications involved. So Caitlin, we'll start again with you. If we were to summarize and talk about what was your wealth strategy that set you up almost 15 years ago, to kind of where you are today, what steps did you take?
I would say that I started with a pretty traditional path in terms of, I was lucky enough to get a job out of college, and actually at that time it didn't come with 401k benefits, but I soon after got another job. I had a little bit of savings, and I was lucky to have a 401k match with that company. So, I just started out making sure that I was maxing out my 401k. My investing knowledge was pretty minimal. And I kind of got this idea after several months in working for this company that, I was like, I feel like I have some pretty stable income, and I am living in a place that's really far away from the rest of my family. I grew up in New York, and I was living in Denver, Colorado, and I wanted to just have some financial roots because I didn't have those family roots in the place where I was living. So I just had this idea that I wanted to buy a home. And so that's really, I was contributing to my 401k. I was making sure that I received my company match. And then I was trying to save up for a down payment to buy just a small home that was big enough for me to live in for the foreseeable future. And those were my two financial goals, really. So eventually that evolved into, I did buy that home. I was able to get a 2-bedroom and recruit a roommate. So I didn't know it at the time, but I was using a strategy called house hacking, which allowed me to essentially be a landlord while living in my own home. So I was having somebody help me pay that mortgage. Fast forward, that helped me launch into wanting to graduate to a new home with my partner, who's now my husband. When we moved, I decided, what if we made this home a rental? So that was my first experiment with real estate investing, and it truly was an experiment. And I cringe thinking about like the things I did as a first-time landlord, but I went for it. And when I started to see the cash flow coming in from that property is when I started to realize that this is a real business. So that launched me into just a long-term buy and hold real estate investing strategy. And as I started to get more established there is when I started to feel more confident in not only having my own rental business, but also managing the money that was coming in and being able to invest it. So it wasn't until that point when I started to look back into, my brokerage accounts and making sure that, I'm not only just maxing out my 401k match, but I'm also contributing to an IRA, and I'm actually investing the assets that I'm contributing. Those were things that I was learning along the way also. So I was making sure that I started to incorporate other traditional investing strategies as I was becoming more confident with my real estate. And then I started to be able to grow and evolve from there. But my rental portfolio is what kind of launched my my interest in making sure that my investments were more lined up, both from a kind of a stock portfolio perspective as well as from a real estate portfolio perspective. And from a real estate portfolio, as I said, I was really looking to long-term buy and hold rentals. I switched to out-of-state investing when I felt like the Denver market had become unaffordable, and I realized I wasn't able to grow my portfolio in the amount of time that I wanted to. So I pivoted to out-of-state, and acquired more properties, started to take on a little bit more risk and use more leverage, and then eventually was able to go back to Colorado to invest more in my home state, and just continue to grow my portfolio, which my strategy really did change a lot in terms of, do I look for cash flow? Do I look for appreciation? We tested the waters and doing some short-term rentals. We eventually started to, make some improvements on some of our properties. So I learned a lot from that perspective, but we pretty much stayed true to a long-term buy and hold strategy on our rental portfolio.
Got it. Thank you, Caitlin, and thanks for sharing that. I think it's such a fascinating thing because I'm excited to hear from Susan as well. You had a different mindset, different approach. You continued to buy and hold. You also had long-term thought process. You did some rehab in the process so that you could probably increase, those rental evaluations, and then maybe part of it you sold because of the higher appreciation, and then continue to buy like bigger and better property. So that's great to hear, Caitlin. Thank you. Susan, would love to hear from you and, kind of what was your strategy?
Yeah. So I guess, the path of financial freedom. So there are really 4 different ways you can go, and you can combine all these. So the first is just living way below your means and saving, saving, saving. The second is paper assets. So stocks and bonds that can typically be a little bit slower. But most people get to at least retirement age with, a retirement account that will sustain them. And then real estate, of course, and then starting a business. And so typically people that end up financially free have done one or more of those things. And I think Caitlin and I have both combined those things. And so, yeah, I mean, like I said, I really was kind of bumbling along in the beginning. I was investing in my 401k, didn't really understand it, didn't really understand how the match worked. I was like, here's this HSA. What is this? Can I invest in this? And even same with buying the first duplex. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't run in any real estate circles, but I just kind of jumped in, and I've learned along the way. I've made a lot of mistakes, which we'll probably talk about later in this discussion. But yeah, so having the first duplex, at that point, we ended up buying 2 more duplexes a couple years later, also in the Austin area. So while we still had W-2 jobs, we had the flexibility to take more risk, which Caitlin also mentioned, and focus more on growth, right? So we didn't have to focus entirely on cash flow. So we were able to stay in a market that was appreciating a whole lot, but wasn't cash flowing as well as some other markets. And so we did stay in the Austin market. We bought 2 more duplexes. We bought a 4-plex. I actually did a 1031 exchange, which is a tax strategy out of our original duplex. And so we had these long-term rental units, and we decided to get into short-term rentals, right when everyone was getting into short-term rentals, right? It was the next big fad, sort of coming out of COVID and the pandemic. And so we ended up buying a beach condo down on the Gulf Coast as a short-term rental, and 2 cabins in the Smokies as short-term rentals. And there's been a lot of adventures with those. And we actually just ended up selling the beach condo 2 weeks ago. We loved going down there, but it was honestly a money pit. But this is what happens, right? You try different things. Some things work, some things don't. I think that is part of, being an investor, is you have to be okay with that, right? If you're going and playing the slot machines, right, not every time is going to be a winner. And so, what I like to tell my clients is you need to set your portfolio up so that you will ultimately be a winner, right? So you want to be in the casino, you want to be the house, right? The house has the advantage. So the house knows, okay, there's some people that are going to pull that lever, they're going to win $1 million, but overall the house is going to make money, right? And so that's how portfolios need to be set up. So yes, it's important to take risks, but also hedge those risks by having a diverse portfolio. And so that's what we've done. We have long-term rentals, we have short-term rentals. We also have invested now in real estate syndications. So we invested in, as a limited partner, in apartment complexes, car washes, a hotel, RV park, self-storage, and a debt fund also. And some of those have done well. Some of those we are probably going to lose all of our money on. And so I think it's really important to have that diversity in the portfolio, right? Because I can say, okay, well, this apartment deal, it completely flopped. We lost $100,000. but we're invested in this other thing that, doubled our money. And now we have 200,000 over here on this other side. So I think a lot of it is, as you start building your portfolio, just keep in mind where your risk tolerance is and what your overall portfolio looks like. Don't, I get some clients that come to me and say, I only have $50,000. I want to put it all in this one thing. And typically that's not the best place to start, right?
Yeah, Susan, that's amazing. And I just want to call in kind of like the concepts that you both shared, but then also the diverse kind of thought process in where all the money goes. So you talked about saving in HSA. Some of the HSAs allow you to invest money, so that's an option. You have 401ks, make sure you're matching. Now, let's say you still have additional money left over. Now you're going maybe some liquid stocks and, you start investing in stocks. And I personally went through actually exactly that journey. Started with HSA, 401k, then basically stocks. And then, okay, I still have a little additional money. I want to diversify because all my 401k is in stocks. HSA is in stocks, and now I have additional brokerage account that's still in stocks. So that's not diverse enough. They all kind of follow a certain pattern. And that's what led me to real estate, to kind of say, okay, now let's diversify within real estate. So that's been great. The other thing that you both called out, so the strategy of, even within real estate, there's a lot of different options. So we have the long-term buy and hold. There's the quick fix and flip that I think, Caitlin, you might have done in one of those cases. And then there was the short-term rentals. Then there are the longer-term rentals that you're doing, Caitlin, and then syndication. So, and along with other assets that are, and I say syndications, it covers kind of a lot of things, car washes, multifamily apartments. So syndication kind of really applies to a lot of different ways. But it really goes to show that there's no one single path. I think the goal here is really to identify what's your future goal. Like, what are you aspiring to do? And what are different mechanisms you want to do? I have had very similar, a couple of my investors come and be like, hey, I have 250K. Can I invest with you in this one specific deal? And usually my response to them is, let's start with 100K here, but maybe we'll do 100, 150 in a different property, or we can find like different assets where it makes sense. So diversifying really is important, and kind of talking with folks who have taken actions and done it. One of the things time and time again that I see is people freezing up and getting really stuck in analysis paralysis, and that really doesn't lead anywhere. So, I know this question is off the books, but I think I'm just going to ask it because I think it's just so prudent to kind of talk about what prompted you to take those actions. And I know you talked about taking that risk, but like it is a mental shift. So what was that mental shift to say, you know what, I don't understand this fully, but I am going to jump in and take action. So Susan, maybe I'll start with you this time first. What prompted you to take that action?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was my childhood growing up. So I grew up in rural Appalachia in East Tennessee. My family didn't have a lot of money, and my mom was trapped in an abusive marriage with my dad, and she was a stay-at-home mom. She had never held a job, and she had no financial means to get out of that situation, and she ended up passing away. And I told myself that I never wanted to be in a situation where I was beholden to a bad person or a bad thing because of money. And so even though I didn't understand investing, I wanted to get into it. I wanted to be in what was, and still is in a lot of ways, a boys' club, right? The men controlling money. I'd seen it in my own life where the man controls the money. And so even at my job, when men were discussing the stock market, I would just sidle up and listen in and start contributing. And I would talk with other real estate investors in the office, and they were all men. But I knew I wanted to be a part of this, and I was going to find a way to make it work. And, like I mentioned, there are ups and downs with it, but you learn every single time. Every mistake, you just keep learning, and you're like, oh, I should have done this. I could have optimized this, but you just keep moving forward. And that's, what we work with a lot of clients, is giving them permission to move forward. Because I think a lot of women, they feel like they're not confident, right, around money because we haven't been exposed to it as much. And so, they need permission to say, okay, you can do this even if you don't know everything. Or, yes, you may have made a mistake in the past, but we're moving forward now, right? And so I think that's really empowering for women. And I think it's been a really good force in my life, and I feel like I am kind of living the legacy of my mom's life by being able to help other women get financial control of their lives and freedom.
That's wonderful, Susan. I love that. And thanks for sharing your personal story. One of the things that you had mentioned just earlier and that just kind of clicked with all the risks that have been taken. So I do a lot of research on some of these millionaires, and it's very fascinating to hear two specific things. One, the venture capitalists, actually, when they're investing, their goal is only to have about 40 to 50% of their projects actually do well, and only about 5 to 10% of them do really well. So they're expecting about 40 or 50% of them to fail. So it's such a fascinating way to think about it. It's a different mindset. You're not betting on everything. You're not betting on everything going perfectly well. You're actually betting on only about 10% of it going well. Now, very similarly, so Warren Buffett, right? And I'm always looking at, well, how does the, Berkshire Hathaway, they kind of have their own portfolio. Majority of the money that they make is only from 10% of the stocks that they hold. That's where majority of the gains are happening. The rest 90% are not doing good, doing okay. So in that kind of similar mindset, like I was in that same place, and it took me a little bit of shifting after holding stocks of multiple different companies, not going to name Disney, who really frustrated me, and Boeing, not going to name specific stocks, but they have not come back up. And, I've held it for a long time. I believe in the values of some of those companies, but you kind of learn to okay, I need to cut my losses and move on. And that shift, like, it was dramatic. And then I had decent losses actually from them, having lost about 40 to 50% value from where I bought it. I sold it, had some tax, benefits, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but then instead reinvested in somewhere else where I actually have had more gains in the short term. So it just goes to say, sometimes you need to know where to accept that risk and move forward. So thank you for sharing that, Susan. Caitlin, like, what was that moment you said, you know what, I'm going to just move on, jump in and take that risk forward?
I would consider myself a pretty independent person. And as I mentioned before, I moved away from the rest of my family, which is all, they're all based in the New York area. And I came out to Colorado, and I felt like I had to make a life for myself. And I had the idea in my head that meant becoming a homeowner. And I was warned by my family members that I shouldn't do it. This is risky. It was also a pretty turbulent economy at the time. I was, just like anybody who was working at that time, facing a potential layoff. It seemed like there was a higher chance of that than normal. And I just felt that I needed to do it. This was my opportunity to really establish my independence here. And I also have an optimistic part of my brain that tends to be a little bit louder than the other parts. And it just said, I'm going to make this work. If I lose my job, I'm still going to make it work. I have some savings I can fall back onto. What would it look like if I had to cover my mortgage with my unemployment? And remember, I was splitting my mortgage with a roommate. So that was one way that I was mitigating my risk. But as I graduated in that real estate investing trajectory, that is just a trend that I see, and I look back now on the decisions that my husband and I made in our portfolio, is that we had to be willing to take a higher level of risk, I think, than the average person. We absolutely could have stayed just investing in the stock market, and we could have invested in a pretty low risk allocation. And we were warned even by many financial advisors that we worked with, I wouldn't put so much money into real estate. You need to be doing more of this standard allocation. And we had to be okay with discussing amongst ourselves and seeing other people practice what we were wanting to do, and those people were seeing results. So we really had to trust that, if we are taking these calculated risks, are we going to be okay with stretching ourselves a little bit? And I think that there has to come a time where you make that decision of, if I want to be more aggressive in my financial path, am I comfortable taking a higher amount of risk than the average person would? And that doesn't mean take uncalculated risks. We still made sure that we had plenty of reserves, and that if all of a sudden the market tanked, we had to be able to make sure that we could hold our properties until the market cycled back up, and making sure that you have room to wait. And that room comes in the form of having those financial reserves, I think is really key. But being able to acknowledge that and move forward saying, I'm comfortable taking this next step and taking a higher level of risk, can really have a lot more reward. And I think that is just what sets somebody apart who is able to reach financial freedom earlier than someone who is taking just very, very conservative steps in their portfolio, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But those are choices that we make throughout our investing careers, right? It's how much risk am I willing to take? If I'm not willing to take any risk and I'm willing to just kind of keep going this path, and seeing a very, very stable amount of growth for the next several number of years, then that's great. And I think that's a great option for a lot of people. And then there are some people, and I was one of those people who said, I don't have the patience for that. I want to see if I can take a higher amount of risk and reduce my timeline. So I just made sure that we were taking those calculated risks. And, one thing that happened too that I like to share, because I think that this really lends a lot to the idea of perspective, is that as we were several years into our real estate investing portfolio, my husband, who had not had traditional W-2 jobs, decided to start to work for a property management company, because we figured, this would be a great opportunity for us to learn more about our rentals. Property management is going to be a great thing for us to learn more about. And what he saw as a property manager, it was terrifying to see what certain owners were dealing with in terms of the loss that they were having on certain properties. Like people were having cars crash into their living rooms, and luckily residents were okay. But, residents couldn't, they had to have some way of honoring a place to live for the remainder of their lease, and the owner had a lot of repairs. And so we would see accidents like that happening. And so every time we had like a pipe burst or, some issues in our rental properties, we had that perspective to feel like, we can still sleep at night. Like, that's not a big deal. We can see, some of the more extreme things that other people are having to deal with, and it's making some of these problems not feel that big of a deal. And in the long run, those problems really aren't a big deal. But having that perspective really helps you sleep at night, and it helps maintain that level of patience to say, okay, look, we're going to have these issues. We're going to have a few months where we're going to need to make up for the financial loss of those issues, and then we're going to get to a better place, rather than being scared off and saying, that's it, I'm done with this, I got to sell, even if it's not the right time to sell.
Yeah, Caitlin, great story. And thank you for sharing that, so much. What you shared right in the beginning too, it's just a reminder that some of your family said, hey, don't do real estate. It is risky. I received very similar advice, from a lot of different folks. So having, mentors through a lot of my corporate jobs and like career, a lot of them had only done financial investments through a financial advisor. And the only feedback I'd get is, hey, just go through the financial advisor. They'll figure it out. It's like, but there are different ways to go about it. And for the longest time, I was listening to people who had not taken any different paths. And, that's kind of one of the, I would say kind of as humans, we end up like looking at instances where we may not want to take risk versus, asking people who had done it, who had kind of been there, were in the trenches, figured it out, and actually were successful. Those are the people we need to be kind of listening and talking to, not the people who have never taken any risks and are sitting on the sidelines. So one of my favorite quotes, and I'm stealing it from a friend, but she talks about, Are you going to be in the arena, or are you going to be, are you going to be in the arena, fighting the fight, or are you going to be admiring the fight from the sidelines? So all depends kind of where you want to be. One has a lot more gain than the other. So it all depends, where is your mindset in from a risk-taking perspective. The other thing I was going to share with both of you is I was given an opportunity potentially to invest in this oil and gas, upcoming new technology. Now, the reason I shared is it's a risk and a reward thing. So like the return they were talking about was amazing. I think it was close to 10x or 11x your investment in about 8 to 10 years. But then the risk of it, it could 90% chances that it will not work out. But then the 10% it does, you would get the 10, 11, 12% return. Amazing return. And maybe if I was, a billionaire, I don't know, maybe my risk threshold is really low. But, that's where you can kind of see the different risk level versus, in some of these real estate, you have the physical asset on you. And most time, like you said, Caitlin, is yes, you may have an AC unit break, and that happened to us, and it wiped out our full years, all the returns that we had, it wiped out completely. But we still had a working unit, we still had income coming in. So there's different ways you can categorize risks. And I see that, the real estate tends to be a little bit more on the risk perspective than some of the other investment options that are out there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And back on the topic of risk too, I think that, there are certain, like the AC repair that you just mentioned, you have to go into a deal understanding, like, are there repairs that I can expect? And then there are going to be repairs that we absolutely can't predict right now. And do we have the reserves to help us get through that period, that financial period? And, am I well insured? Do I have a, liability policy as well, umbrella, landlord policy? And then when it comes to private investments, when I started going towards the path of syndication, I felt confident, thanks to my real estate experience, to underwrite a lot of the deals, and I vet operators in a way that, I was kind of comparing them to myself when I analyzed deals, and I really tried to grade them on their level of experience and what kind of storms that they can weather, and really looking at their underwriting to determine if I felt like their underwriting was super conservative. Because for me, investing in a deal like that is a higher level of risk. I interpret that as a higher level of risk than my own rental portfolios. But if I can really look at their underwriting and look at their level of experience, and I feel confident about it, then I will make a decision to invest in that deal, as long as I'm willing to say there's a chance I won't see this money again, and like what that oil and gas deal that you were talking about, if it really fits all of your criteria and you feel like you've really vet it, then it's something that you want to invest in, you just need to have that conversation with yourself of, am I willing to part with this money? Am I going to be okay if I don't see this money again? And when you're talking about 8 to 10 years, also, you're not going to see that money in 8 to 10 years anyway. So you have to also really plan for that period of time.
Yeah, Caitlin, great point. I have a very religious investor with me, and I say like religiously investing with me for last 4 or 5 deals. She's a doctor, and like, of course, like doctors make decent money, to put it mildly. And like every single time she's like, I can just, it's fine. Like I can invest this. If I don't see it again, no big deal. And every time she's like, and I'm always surprised. And she's like very happy about it. So I think it's the right mindset and attitude about it too. We have a question, and I just want to make sure that we answer kind of while we're going through. So for somebody who may be living, say, paycheck to paycheck, how do you begin your financial freedom through real estate investing? I think that is a very good, valid question. I know you both advise folks, and I just add like a quick little thing. There's quite a few steps you can take from being paycheck to paycheck. I mean, there's of course like identify expenses. Susan mentioned that right in the beginning. Can you decrease your living expenses? Can you really figure out, what's going on? Look at the credit card statements, really, make a very detailed understanding of what can you reduce from expenses and what do you absolutely need. The other thing or a tip that I was going to quickly share is from my own personal story is there was a time period I couldn't pay my rent. And so I had to have that conversation with the landlord and say, hey, can you reduce it by $100, but I will still stay with you, 100, 150, whatever that number is. Most of the cases now, me being on that, side of property management, we would rather keep you as a good renter than lose that apartment to somebody who may not pay. So, there's always an option if you are in that rental space, not owning a home, but renting space, you can ask for those payment reductions, and then they would rather keep you than, lose you to somebody who may or may not pay. So that certainty is, always higher value than that. But would love your thoughts, on that aspect.
Yeah. So one thing we talk a lot about is seasons of financial freedom, and how there are going to be seasons where you're just in the hustle, right? And that's what you have to do. So if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you are maybe in your hustle season, right? You're on the financial freedom journey, but you're building your nest egg. And typically, I mean, the first low-hanging fruit, if you have a 401k, invest up to the match. That's before you invest in anything else. Put money in your 401k up to the match. That is part of your salary. And if you're not doing that, you're letting your company off the hook for paying you part of your salary. So that's your really like low-hanging fruit of investment. Second tier is going to be your HSA, your FSA, dependent care FSA, limited expense FSA, and ESPP if you have one of those, usually through a tech company. That's second tier of low-hanging fruit, tax advantaged investments. And so only when you're putting money in those, really, we kind of move on to the third tier, right? Which is, okay, do I want to start investing in a taxable brokerage, real estate, private equity? What is the next best step at that point? Or even maxing out your 401k. If you think you want to retire at 65, that's a great place to put your money, right? There are other ways. Typically, real estate does have a little bit higher bar of entry as far as having assets, but there are ways, like Caitlin mentioned, to get in with a lower bar, like house hacking, getting a roommate, renting out part of your property somehow. You can also participate in wholesaling. It's a little challenging to get into, but that's, if you can find connections, that's actually a good way to just be the middleman in a deal. And you just get to take money, and you don't have to put your money on either side of the deal. And then, once you get a little more cash, then you can start looking at, buy and hold or a short-term rental. You could even consider doing a short-term rental on part of your property if you're able to set up like an ADU unit, or even buy like an RV if that's allowed by your neighborhood, park it in your yard. We are considering doing this here at our house. So there are a lot of different things you can think about that maybe don't take as much money to get into real estate, but you really want to hit those low-hanging fruits first. When you're in that like hustle stage, living paycheck to paycheck, make sure you are taking advantage of everything you can from a tax standpoint, and holding your employer accountable for paying you all of your salary. Like that match is part of your salary. And that was, I'll be honest, like I did not do that when I started working, because I was like, oh, retirement's so far away. What is this? They're making me put this money in for a match. And that was, something that I learned and felt kind of silly about, but and I wish I had someone there to tell me this at the beginning, that said, hey, this is important for you to invest this much up to the match, because this is part of your salary. And then look at the HSA, look at the FSA. And I wish someone had explained all those accounts to me along the way. And, I did okay bumbling along, but, if I hadn't had to bumble along, then I might have twice as much money as I have now, right? And so I think it's, you just start where you are, you go season to season, and just kind of reevaluate, and even reevaluating the risk every season. And we've been talking a lot about risk. So, in the beginning, probably you don't want to be as risky. In the middle, when you've got a stable W-2 job, you've got some nest egg, you can start taking those risks that are really going to grow your portfolio. And then once you early retire, like where I am now, I am de-risking my portfolio because I don't have a W-2 job to fall back on now, right? So if my cash flow stops on my investments, then I'm out of money. So now I'm taking, this stance where you're the oil investment, right? Like that would not be a good investment for me right now. If you had asked me 3 years ago when I was still working my W-2 job and I could take risks like that, I might have said, hey, sure, let's go for it, right? But now I would say, nope, that doesn't fit in my risk profile anymore because I'm looking for more conservative investments that I know will have cash flow. And I'm reevaluating my real estate portfolio based on that too. I'm looking at all my properties, the expenses and the income and saying, does this make sense for me to hold it anymore based on the cash flow it's throwing off? Or should I go put this, in treasury bonds or, a covered call fund that's paying out 8% dividends in the stock market, something that has a little bit more reliable cash flow. And I'm not going to be hit with, an AC bill, a water heater bill, a tenant dying, all of which have happened to me in the past month. So
Oh my gosh. Susan, I love what you kind of added there, and just to kind of like the barriers to entry, right? Like that is kind of the hardest part. And if you can like even talk about it, and I would love your thoughts on this, Caitlin, the barriers to entry sometimes, even for single family home, and I know you talked about Austin, and of course you talked about Denver, Caitlin, like these markets, even in DFW market, like my house value has gone up by 60% in 5 years. So, and for any average home here, 750 to a million, like even a down payment in some of these houses is up to 150 to 200K, which a lot of people at this point in time cannot afford to bring that sort of down payment. And that's where, I'm starting to see a shift in trend from syndications, where some of these syndications will let folks in, most of these investments are like minimum 50K investments. Some of the investors are even like, hey, like, can we start out with 25K? And there's some like introductory like ways to kind of get people into some of these investments and get them to feel the idea. So that's been another trend that I've been seeing as well. But Caitlin, I'll ask for kind of your thoughts on this too. What do you think from paycheck to paycheck, but then also shifting from, let's say you have smaller income left, like how did you progress through that?
Yeah, one thing I want to emphasize is you can be on a financial freedom journey, whether you're living paycheck to paycheck or looking to invest in private deals. You don't need to be looking at those private deals in order to be on your financial freedom journey. And where I would start too is first take a look at your expenses and making sure that you don't have any high interest debt. That's always the first thing that I would say is something that you take care of even before you start to make very, very small incremental investments, because if you're paying high interest debt, you're likely draining your income faster than you will be able to grow your investments. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is really take a hard look at your expenses and really ask yourself where you can cut down. And I know some people truly are in a position where they're needing to meet their needs, and that is hard these days. So I know that's a frustrating situation when you're having to look at your expenses and literally none of them can go. But I would really encourage you, take a look at your expenses and really question where you can cut down, and then take a look at what you already have. If you happen to be renting in a place where you have extra space, is it possible for you to rent, do a sublet of part of that space? If you are lucky enough to own the space that you're in right now, is there a part of that you can use to generate more income? I know Susan was joking about like RV rentals. We had our primary home, which we just left literally last week. It had been our primary for 11 years. And when we first moved in, it had this mother-in-law apartment, and we were renting that out on Airbnb. So it was attached to our home. We were renting it out. And somebody hit us up on our Airbnb listing asking if they could park their tiny home on our property and pay us rent for that. And it's not something that we went out to look for, but it's something that we considered, and then we did it. And I will tell you that if you find tiny ways, smaller than that, smaller than renting out part of your house or, part of your land, but finding tiny ways to generate income with what you already have, it not only gives you a little bit of income, but it really starts to shift your mindset and it forces you to think in that way going forward. And that, I think, is one of the biggest powers of being an investor, and being an investor with aggressive goals is that you are now starting to think of ways that you can create income out of what you have. And when you assess situations and you make decisions, you're making that based on, what kind of opportunities can I create with this decision that I'm making? And I think that that is really powerful. So if you can start making small steps in that direction, I think that that's going to help you so much. And that might get you to a position where you're then able to start saying, I can do my 401k match. I can start investing elsewhere. And do it in a way like Susan said, where you're not saying, I'm going to try and scrape up $10,000 to invest in this one deal that sounds really amazing. Like, start lower risk and start with a nice diversified low-cost index fund, and build your confidence and build your knowledge and give yourself some breathing room. And that's where you can really, after that, start to take steps in a different direction if you want to. So I think that that's really important. And Divya, was there another part of the question too that I think
I think you got it, Caitlin. So thank you for saying that. One of the things I just want to remind folks, and it's fascinating for me every single time I hear this, is most of the millionaires out there, they have good 6 to 7 income streams that they are going after. It's not just one. Well, W2 is one of them. So investment portfolio is another one. They may have some real estate. They may have some additional, some of them even are writing, say, a book, or they have some digital products that they have put out there. So there's different ways, or investing, even venture investing in some of the startups. So there's like a lot of different ways you can think about income coming to you. It's just you have to start really thinking a little bit more broadly and not just be stuck in one or the other way. There are many ways out there. I think it's just opening your mind and truly kind of having that perspective that we talked about. So that's kind of where it is. I know we are we only got a few minutes, and I would love to just take a couple minutes and talk about the program you both are setting up. So there's a program that you both are setting up where, one, you're talking about what are different tax strategies you can take and, kind of combine it along with a financial planning journey. So would love, Caitlin, I'd just love maybe a couple sentences just to kind of talk about what is that program and how can people, from this group can benefit from it.
Yeah, thank you for asking, Divya. Right now, Susan and I offer a lot of strategy-based coaching, and we work one-on-one with clients. And one thing that we're super excited about offering here at the end of this year is opening doors to a group coaching program, which also has a lot of community support and accountability. And we are so excited to offer that aspect of really working alongside of other people who are on a similar journey of financial freedom. So we're still offering that strategic coaching when it comes to investing and tax strategy, and really taking a look at someone's lifestyle and what their goals are from a lifestyle perspective as well as a financial perspective, to really make sure we're tying that in a holistic way, and not just creating financial goals that are not necessarily applying to somebody's life that they want to live.
Thank you, Caitlin. Anything you'd add, Susan?
Yeah, I think, what really kind of sets the two of us apart is that our support is unbiased. And so a lot of our clients will bring us deals that they're interested in or syndications they're interested in. And we talked through those with them and say, these are the pros, these are the cons. And so I think it's really hard to find that kind of support, especially with other women. And also to even have a holistic approach, right? So you can't, if you bring real estate to your Fidelity financial advisor, he's going to be like, nope, don't do this, right? And so Caitlin and I, we've done stock investing, bond investing, real estate, private equity. We've kind of run the gamut of all these different types of investments. And so we can help women create this holistic, diversified portfolio that also is aligned with their eventual goals. Do they want to spend more time with their kids? Do they want a big nest egg to leave to a charity that means a lot to them? Like, there are a lot of really meaningful goals that women have. And I think And one thing that we found is that women do tend to have more philanthropic goals. And so it's actually better for the whole world when women have more money.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Susan, for sharing that. It's been eye-opening session for a lot of us. Hopefully you got a lot out of it. Thank you for all the positive comments. We really do appreciate it. We would love to continue to get, if you have suggestions for future sessions, Susan has talked about tax strategy in past, and I know we didn't get to it. There was such good content today. So we will probably do another follow-up session to talk specifically about how can you use and leverage tax strategy specifically and really reduce the tax you owe, but then also how you can really increase your investments, from there. So more to come on that, but thank you so much for your time, and we really appreciate you. Everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Divya.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.